Hi everyone, I am really sorry about the delay with this video. I'm gonna try to be more consistent with uploading moving forward. I know a lot of you have just sat watching me sitting talking about stuff to the camera, but I'm hoping this is a bit more interesting and a bit better structure-wise. I spent the last video talking about my experience with addiction and how it has kind of helped me with writing a script for the short film I'm working on, and I thought it'd be good to kind of touch on the other aspect of the film I'm working on. Of course, in my untitled Muppet body horror movie, body horror. For those of you who aren't really sure what this is or aren't very aware, body horror is a subgenre of, you guessed it, horror that portrays a physical or psychological transformation of a person over a given length of time. For some, there is a fast distortion of the life they once knew, like Frank Kafka's Metamorphosis, where this guy just wakes up and he's a bug and he has to deal with that. And in other cases, it's a slow transition out of everyday life into pure insanity, like Junji Ito's Uzumaki, where a town becomes obsessed with spirals, essentially. It's good, I swear. I love Junji Ito's work. I gotta shout him out, man. If I ever got the chance to talk about my love for Ito's work, I'd be jumping at it. But today is not that day. Right now, I just want to spend a bit of time talking about my favourites and my recommendations of this subgenre. I think there's so many different themes and messages it portrays. There's a lot of names that are super big in horror, and a lot of them started off, even movies in general as well, that started off in this kind of like semi-low budget body horror. It's not all low budget, but they're sick. There isn't really any dissent into like how graphic it's gonna get. It's a bit all over the place, so discretion is very much advised right now. I've tried and tested to write a video like this for as long as I can remember, so I am super grateful and excited to have this moment. I'm going to be going over movies that have either stuck with me in a bad way, movies I've refused to watch, movies that I am dying to watch, and movies that I just deeply love. Again, discretion is advised. There will be some pretty dark topics mentioned, and I'm going to try and handle this with a bit of grace, keep things vague as well for people who are intrigued. But with that said, I hope you enjoyed this as much as I will. So I'm going to kick it off with dishonorable mentions. These are movies that I don't feel very attached to when it comes to this kind of genre. There are certain things that kind of throw me off, and other things where like I see the name and I want nothing to do with it, essentially. To start this off, I'm going to mention Street Trash, directed by J. Michael Muro, who went on to be a cinematographer for Rush Hour 3, which is really neat. It follows a group of homeless people who begin melting after drinking a liquor that is 60 years old, which is a choice. This is one, admittedly, that I haven't seen, but I know that it uses multiple slurs and DV against women, and a very cruel portrayal of homelessness, which like doesn't sit right with me. And I know it's a really silly reason to avoid something, especially in horror, but I just don't think it'll tickle my pickle. Some of the effects I've seen as well are just interesting. The next movie I aim to avoid is Thinner, adapted from a Stephen King story and directed by Tom Holland. Child's Play director Tom Holland, not Marvel Tom Holland. This movie is about an obese lawyer who is cursed to grow thinner and thinner, and he works with his friends to try and lift this curse before he is nothing but bones. And this is one that genuinely sounds really interesting, and maybe I will get around to it someday, but all I know is it portrays a really stereotypical depiction of Romani culture, and they use a very unconvincing fat suit, which for someone like me, yeah, puts me off. The next movie is probably one of the most notorious modern body horrors, which is Tusk, directed by Kevin Smith. This is probably the only movie on this mini list that I have seen, and I still have very mixed opinions about. I've only watched it once a few years ago when I was still quite young and naive, and I was slowly falling down this rabbit hole of disturbing movies, and yeah, I fell, and that explains a lot about me as a person. Tusk follows a man named Wallace who is searching for an interesting story to talk about on his male podcast, and he finds a flyer for someone offering a free place to stay and many interesting stories. He had no idea that the man who put up that flyer was an old man set on finding a subject that could perfectly replicate his old walrus friend, Mr. Tusk. And right from the get-go, as this movie starts, Wallace is a nympho narcissist. I mean, he's a white man running a podcast. What do you expect? Once he meets this man, though, he is completely helpless. Like, he has no choice but to adapt to life after this encounter. It's a pretty hard watch with some moments that really stretch. I mean, the sound design, the effects, they really terrified me when I watched it. I couldn't listen to the Fleetwood Mac song Tusk ever again. I still refuse. And even though I've seen it, I don't really know if I can actually recommend it. It's a very mixed film for me, and I think, again, the effects and the performances are so interesting to me, but it is a pretty hard film to actually stomach. Next on this kind of evil list are the Human Centipede movies. I haven't seen any of them, and I can't say one really puts me off more than the other, bar the second one, which I've heard is atrocious. I think everyone gets the gist from the title alone of the movie. Like, I don't really need to explain anything. And everyone's heard this movie to death, and I don't want to put myself through them willingly. Even if I can agree with the director's, like, actual proposed vision for this film, I just refuse to watch any. And the final of the dishonorable mentions is a movie I hope I never have the agony of seeing, and that's Martyrs, a French psychological horror film from the early 2000s that tortures women relentlessly. I have zero interest in going too into depth in this movie or watching it. I think the actual idea of the plot is kind of interesting, which is kind of how far you can push someone to witness life after death. And reading about how much the director and the crew were fighting for this film to be released and not censored had me a bit invested, but even after that, yeah, some of the scenes I've seen and the descriptions of the rest just freak me out. It contains every kind of abuse against women possible, and seeing it in sex for £8. I just didn't want to do it. It's one of those movies I don't think you'll actually have heard about unless you're on one of them deeper circles, or you've seen one of them iceberg videos, which I've seen 12. But that's dealt with. I want to talk about 10 of my favourite body horror movies. It is such an insightful subgenre to research and to watch different films capturing. And there's so many ways it depicts paranoia and fear and many sensitive topics in a nuanced manner. It also has the ability to dip its toes into sci-fi and comedy and thrillers, and even most zombie movies, vampire movies, you wouldn't even classify as body horror. They still technically fall into this category. But I better get on with this video before it ends up being 3 hours long. I'm also going to do some honourable mentions at the very end. Same as before, but it's stuff that I think it can be stomached, and it's stuff that wouldn't crack my personal top 10, but are very much up there, some of the greats. I'm I'm kind of doing it in a least to most favourite here. And I think for anything below the top two, it depends on the day. So the first to go is District 9, directed by Neil Blomkamp, which I hope is pronounced right. This film opens in a mockumentary style of reporters and authorities in South Africa who, upon seeing crustacean-like aliens arrive to Earth looking malnourished and ill, immediately send them off to the titular District 9, the camp where they're kept away from the entire population. This film was heavily inspired by the apartheid that took place in South Africa almost 50 years ago, therefore portraying xenophobia, segregation, and racism very head on. We follow one of the workers of the South African contractors named Wickus, and he is sent to push extraterrestrials into these camps. And in an attempt to evict a group from their home, he is sprayed by one of them and he begins mutating into one of them. And it forces him to reconsider the prejudiced beliefs he's upheld when the humans in his life begin to turn on him. This is a movie that my dad likes. Like, it's a dad film. It has plenty of sci-fi elements and action and a bit of social commentary in between, which is like a banger for me. Of course, the commentary can feel a bit on the nose, but I think for someone looking to kind of ease their way into this genre, it's a really good place to start. The mutation aspect of this film is quite graphic and quite grim. I mean, it is an action as well, but the horror of it like really worked for me. And I think because it's masked in so much action, it probably could work for a lot of people. Next on my silly little list is Titan, directed by Julia Ducournau. I really hope I'm pronouncing that right. It's about a serial killer fascinated by vehicles in erotic ways after discovering she's pregnant and accidentally burning her parents' houses down. She accepts their deaths and runs away from home, posing as a man's long-lost son to escape her history of murder. She builds a close relationship with this man as she gets more and more pregnant and struggles to hide both her real identity and her pregnancy. This is a movie that was recommended by lecturers on my course, which is insane to think about, actually. This film was like quite a thrill, honestly, and even my description could not capture how it is. It's both insane and nonchalant at the same time. After our first viewing, I had no idea how to feel, but I can say it was terrifically shot, especially throughout the opening of the film. The cinematography is fantastic, performances are fantastic. We were told to find inspiration from Frankenstein in this film, in a sense, and there's obvious links between identity, nature versus nurture, and the isolation that kind of comes with trauma and how people respond to it. Just an interesting watch. Talking about Frankenstein, we're gonna get camp with it. This is my guiltiest pleasure of all time, Frankenhooker, which is exactly what it says on the tin. When a young scientist loses his girlfriend in a freak lawnmower accident, which leaves only her head intact, he sets out to find fresh body parts to reconstruct her corpse. There are some absolutely killer moments in this movie, bar the semi-misogynistic undertones. I'm a terrible feminist for loving this movie. It's not the best acted, it's not the highest budget, but this is a fun time. It's not super graphic because of the budget, and it's so camp, so very camp. I ought to talk about something more sophisticated, so I'm going to talk about The Substance, directed by Coraline Fargeau, I think. Aging celebrity Elizabeth Sparkle loses her job as a workout instructor, and in a desperate attempt to regain her youth, takes a drug that creates a younger version of herself. I think this is the film that definitely got me thinking about body horror, and everything in this movie is so visceral and uncomfortable, very purposefully done. I watched it with my boyfriend not long ago, and he felt like he was getting rage baited the whole time. Like, he was angry at literally everyone in the movie, which I do understand, I think, but I think my love for the performances and the effects and the set and everything just kind of trumps his opinion. There's kind of a debate around this film with like a double standard on calling out Hollywood's mistreatment of aging actresses, while also casting a woman who barely looks her real age. Like, she's stunning. But I've seen a lot of people talking about it before, and I think if you want a film to kind of test your limits when approaching body horror, this is a pretty good place to start. One last camp movie before getting to the proper spooky stuff, and we have probably my most recent body horror watch, which is Peter Jackson's Brain Dead. And yes, it's Lord of the Rings, Peter Jackson. I honestly don't even know how to explain this movie. So a rabid rat monkey thing bites the mother of the protagonist, Nigel, while she's spying on him with a date, where he's with a girl who falls in love with him because of tarot cards. And this bite soon grows into like a proper zombie infection that begins to spread, and honestly, like, insanity follows. The best thing I can recommend is to find clips or read Letterboxd reviews, because this thing's a blast. It's renowned as one of the like grossest, goriest films ever made, and I absolutely agree with this sentiment. It is madness. It is Evil Dead on crack. Honest to God, it's 100% worth a watch. I can't stop thinking about it. Another movie I can't stop thinking about, and I could not go this long without talking about, is Tetsuo the Iron Man. Another crackhead banger made almost entirely by one man, Shinya Tsukamoto, I think, which deserves some recognition for sure. We see a man who starts growing metal in his body not long after hitting a metal fetishist who loved putting metal in his body with his car. Another movie where the budget isn't super huge. It's a bit incohesive, it's a bit trippy, it's quite gross a lot of the time, and there is this lingering sexuality around metal in this movie, a lot like Titan. And the man we follow loses his grip on reality, and he begins acting violently and impulsively, following his mutations. And this escalates as the film goes on. Honest to God, there needs to be more media looking into this film. It's really something. The transformation in this film absolutely captivated me, but the plot itself is a little hard to grasp on the first watch. I had Wikipedia up. But the whole movie is on Internet Archive with subtitles. And I know it's probably better known for being on like Disturbing Movie icebergs and watch Disturbing Movie videos, yeah. Do I regret watching it? No. Should you watch this with your family? No. Another movie I absolutely have to talk about is Alien. Ridley Scott's Alien. A notorious banger. Following a small space crew who explore an abandoned ship only to find an extraterrestrial creature known as a xenomorph who hunts, impregnates, and spreads in numbers over the film. And there is such an intensity to this film, even from the creepy ass tagline to the H.R. Geiger inspiration, which is beautiful. Similar to Titan, there is a sense of pregnancy horror, there's bodily violation, it leaves them completely vulnerable, and this is where we get to see one of my favourite aspects of body horror, and that is the collapse of social structures and the innate distrust humanity faces under stress. We see this in some of the later entries as well, but situations like this where it feels very hopeless, there's a lot of uncertainty over who can actually overcome this and who's already accepted their fate, and it creates a lot of disharmony, a lot of paranoia, and it makes for a very intense watch. It's just a classic. I'm only really talking about the first here, maybe even the second, which was also amazing. Even Romulus, the newer one, I loved as well. We've made it onto the big three. Thank you. If you stayed this long, I love you. I love you and I appreciate you. This is where I'm talking animated movies, which is one of my passions as well. I have to talk about Akira. I simply must. I love when animation and horror combines, because this is when we get movies like Akira. This set the bar. Set in an alternate universe following the end of World War III, Akira follows two members of a biker gang in Neo-Tokyo, Canada, and his friend Tetsuo, who encounters what I think was described as a child Esper. They have telekinesis, they can manipulate kind of the world around them. I think after colliding with this Esper, Tetsuo gains telekinetic powers, which rapidly grows out of control as he is subject to rigorous testing by the government. At the heart of this movie is a story that portrays societal collapse and the corruption of power, which I love. Even outside of the outlying themes and plot, it is a spectacle to behold. It is such a cultural juggernaut, from the music to the bike slide to the animation. I honestly think this could be enjoyed by anyone. Maybe not a family movie though. There was meant to be a live action version in the works with Taika Waititi directing, and I'm quite glad that's been scrapped. I just think why are we doing this? Why do we keep doing this, guys? Leave peak as peak, simply put. We are finally getting into the top 2. I'm trying to keep this as brief as I can. I'm so happy to be here. I'm kicking it off with John Carpenter's spectacular sci-fi horror, The Thing. A group of researchers in the Antarctic encounter an alien life form which can perfectly imitate the creatures around it. And very much like Alien, there is an overwhelming sense of isolation and paranoia. And from the viewer's perspective, it really gets you engrossed watching. And even the practical effects are just, for an 80s movie as well, it's mind-bending to me. I could not recommend it enough if I tried. I mean, terrific visual effects, terrifying plot, amazing soundtrack as well, and so much ambiguity to it as well. And it's one of those movies that's a bit of a slow burn, so you really do kind of have to lock in there. And I was so confused on my first watch. I was still like bracing for everything, but after a third watch, everything felt perfect. Perfect movie for me, with the exception of probably one of my favorite movies of all time, like in general, and it is none other than David Cronenberg's The Fly. I should mention that this is actually a remake of a 1958 film with the same name, which is also quite a classic, and it stars Vincent Price, which does make it worth a watch. But Cronenberg is kind of an undisputed king of body horror, and it makes me wish I'd actually done a bit of The Star talking about him, because he's everything. He's released banger after banger when it comes to body horror. I mean, I genuinely creamed when he made a cameo in the new Ready or Not. I love this man. Now, The Fly is an absolutely goated sci-fi horror about a man played by the gorgeous Jeff Goldblum, who successfully invents a teleportation device, but after getting trapped in one of the pods with a fly, the machine morphs the DNA into one, and his health rapidly deteriorates. This, top 4 movies for me. It is such a blast. The grossness of it feels very fitting. And it was released in 1986, which meant a lot of people walked away from it seeing it as a representation of the AIDS epidemic and kind of the inevitable deterioration of people going through it and the tragedy that would often come with it. It was guaranteed. And for that reason, it is kind of a devastating watch. It really is. But I feel like it kind of, it balances the doom of the situation with some truly grotesque horror. I mean, I feel bad that this is the only movie here where I've actually mentioned the lead actor, but I swear to God, guys, he really is that good. You have to take my word here, he's at, career best. It is simply ethereal, especially for me, with multiple layers throughout. There's psychological horror as he begins questioning his nature. He's like, was I a fly all along? Was I a human? Was I a fly living in a human's body? He does this speech near the end. It actually kills me every time. I mean, it's how does a genius scientist work with a situation like this? It's the best. And it is probably kicking around somewhere online. I watched it on Disney originally, but I'm now very proud to own this on DVD. David Cronenberg just has the sauce, people. I don't know what to tell you. There's psychological, there's a lot of body mutilation itself. There's even a bit of pregnancy horror thrown in there, like Titan. And it's such a personal movie for me because I love it so much. But it's time to take a moment to shout out the movies that were not in my top 10, but are most certainly worth a watch. I gotta do my Cronenberg bit, man. Videodrome Brute Crash. Phenomenal. Very psychosexual. This man is very psychosexual. I think Crash is very similar to Titan. I watched it recently. It made me question, maybe I am attracted to cars. Another recent watch for me, it was Crimes in the Future. A lot of people were really mixed on this film, but I quite enjoyed it. I think it played with is body horror in itself an art form? Like is manipulating the way your body works an art form? It was funky. Another movie I watched fairly recently was James Gunn's Slither. There was a scene in a barn. It haunts me to this day, and I don't know where it's going to end up streaming, but I think it's worth a watch at least once. I mentioned Evil Dead earlier because I was very torn between putting it on here, but I know the second one definitely counts as body horror, so I regret it now. Another zombie-esque movie, Reanimator, mostly science fiction, but it's a great movie for people kind of microdosing into body horror. And final movie I've been meaning to watch is Ugly Stepsister. I don't even think it got a UK release, which devastates me. Once it's on DVD, I'm on it, and I regret not looking for it when I could. That is it, people. You sat with me. I don't know how long this is going to end up being. Hopefully under 30 minutes. I really do love this subgenre so much, and the different themes it portrays. I think it's so varied and interesting, whether it's like a pure gore fest or it's mainly psychological. I hope this video isn't too off-putting for the people I know. And thank you so much for watching.